Everybody's so spread out in here. Happy to have you all here. Can you hear me? I need to talk a little closer. Good morning.
Good morning.
I think Mondays are a good day to have meetings like this, especially in the rain. It's good to have everyone here. Sorry we canceled our last meeting. We had conflicts. Anytime you book a meeting like this during fall break with all your school kids being out of school, it's pretty easy where the priority ought to be. It ought to be with the family. And so I appreciate y'all allowing us to postpone that meeting. We'll reschedule it in a future date. This is our second time we've gotten together for our Freight and Logistics Commission Study Committee, and it's a great topic, one that I've been passionate about for many, many years, as most of you, I'm sure. My co-partner here, Rick Jaspers, is new to the industry and doing a great job, and he's going to say a few words and welcome you at this time. Thank you.
And just like, sure enjoy working with Chairman Gooch, very easy to work with for sure, but just thank you for being here on Monday. And a few regrets. Calvin Smyrie, who is one of our members, supposed to be sitting over there, has been appointed by the president to be the ambassador to the Dominican Republic. And I talked to him for quite a while yesterday, and he's hoping Ted Cruz will let his one out at least so he can get work. But he's meeting with the State Department today, and he wanted to make sure I told y'all he misses you, and he will help as this thing moves along as he can. Last night we had a great dinner at one of our members' place, Matt Gibbs. Matt was not our last meeting, but we made it for it last night. I had a great dinner with members who could be there. Had a great facility, LAD Trucking over in Watkinsville. Matt, thank you for you and your family. It was great to see a family organization working so well together. And we appreciate you doing that. But also, Chairman Gooch and I do a lot of different things. And we've got to just recognize Madison. Wave your hand, Madison, if you know Madison Hendershot. Takes care of us. And Seth, on the end there, with Georgia Chamber, GTA, we appreciate you guys because you sure make this a lot easier for us, and we appreciate it. John Burns, one of our members, is doing a broadband announcement in Sylvester.
I'm glad someone's getting it.
Yeah, I know you're cheering. It's been that's just for me. I appreciate the outreach that a number of y'all have done to me to bring me up to speed on your little segment of this pie. And it burst out. I've been very busy learning and listening to y'all, and I sure do appreciate that. But Chairman Gooch, want to introduce our...
Yeah, I will. I'm going to deviate a little bit from the agenda. I saw Griff this morning. It's great to see you here with us this morning in Savannah. As you all know, he's the head honcho of the Georgia ports, and we've got a lot of good things going on in Georgia and across our nation. But you see a lot of publicity right now on the news about the shortage, the labor shortage, and also the impact that it's having on our ports, especially out on the West Coast. So I thought I'd let Griff give an update on how that has impacted the Savannah ports and the East Coast as well. So Griff, if you want, come on up and spend just a few minutes talking about all of that, and then we'll jump right into the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, don't have any prepared comments, but I'll just tell you that, wow, we have a lot of volume to ports. If you have been reading the news, you've read the paper, and you've looked at transportation, you know that out in LA Long Beach, there's about 70 plus ships at anchor. There's over 100 ships at anchor in LA Long Beach, but 70 of which are container vessels. I didn't see my board member over there. Mr. Grantham. 70 of which are container vessels, and then in Savannah, we actually have 20 plus vessels as well. It ranges from 20 to 26 ships. And the reason is that if you go back a year and a half ago when COVID first struck, in China, we all know it shut down and production completely stopped. And last summer, the summer last, companies like Walmart and Amazon and other Target, Home Depot, they were having issues with inventory, and their sales, while they were very good, were not as good as they could have been had they had product here. And the reason they were having low inventory is because everything shut down, the shipping channels shut down, our freight dropped off. Well, this year, in order to prevent against that, make sure they cover all the risks, many of the retailers over-ordered. They did two things. They're leaving and departing from what has worked for a long time, which is what we all know is the just-in-time kind of methodology that's been used in supply chain for many years, decades. And now what they use is just in case. All right, so they're going to get more freight here earlier, even earlier than it's needed. So what's happening at the ports is, and through the entire supply chain, is we're just kind of overwhelmed with freight. Not only do we have a lot of freight, but it's not moving as quickly as it normally does. So when you look at import containers moving through ports, they're normally sitting on a container terminal, a container maybe 4 to 6 days. That would be the long side on average. Today, just a month ago, we went up as high as 12 days. So that means we have 3 times as many containers on our terminal, 2 to 3 times at any given time. So when that happens, everything kind of slows down. With all that freight coming through, it's not just the ports though. If you look through the whole supply chain, warehouses are backing up, there's not enough warehousing. There's not enough trucking. And quite frankly, when you have that much cargo, and the question is going to be, is there enough consumer goods being purchased to move the goods? And we're going to find that out here, because what the supply chain is preparing for right now are the holidays. This is our peak season, and we'll see how that all plays out. As I say all this, just know that inflation is here, building is taking more money, prices are going up, so I think that will get everything back under control a little bit. Hopefully it doesn't overcorrect. But where we stand today is the Georgia Ports is investing. We appreciate our board support and the state support. We're investing a lot of money. Matter of fact, over just the last 2 months, we've put in over $100 million in new berths, cranes, yard capacity. We have the ability to expand, but these projects are capital intensive and they take a lot of time. So very happy to report in December, we're going to start rolling out new capacity, which is going to help us clear those ships. Part of the ship issue is not that we don't have enough capacity on the dock side. It's we have to kind of slow them down because we're discharging more into our terminal than what is moving out. And that's the first time we ever faced this. The entire supply chain is shocked right now, and what's happening is we're all trying to kind of reinvent the wheel to figure out how do we get through this particular time, because what we're seeing is completely unprecedented. We will work through it. The big question we keep getting is are goods going to get to the stores for the holidays and whatnot? And I keep saying in the Southeast, you're going to be fine. I don't know about the rest of the country. But in all seriousness, it is a challenge. We appreciate everyone's support. And if there's any questions or anything like that, I'm here to answer them and as we go throughout the day as well. Yes, sir.
Griff, one of the things that happened when the longshoremen went on strike was we saw an influence of more things coming our way. Since they're kind of backed up, shall we say constipated, I love to use that term on them. Cynthia, can we see more of that coming in through Savannah?
I think we can and we are. It's tough to know the exact numbers, but it's a really good question because it just so happens that this coming year in 2022, the West Coast and the East Coast are on different contract years. The unions, they're different unions. One is the ILW and one is the ILA. The ILA is the East Coast. The ILW on the West Coast, their contract expires in mid-2022. So we have a negotiation coming up on the West Coast, and every time this happens, what shippers do, just to protect themselves and the risk aversion, is to divert some cargo to the East Coast in case there's any labor issues. And every contract negotiation that's occurred in the last 20 years has had some sense of slowdown or labor issues associated with it, so one might believe that it would happen again. We'll see. We don't know for sure, but I would fully expect that in early 2022, we'll see even more diversions to the East Coast. For sure, good question. But we appreciate all the building that's happening out there, the roads, the network, the warehouses, all those things that are coming online to support the incredible growth that we're seeing. We have, for the last 12 months, broken a record every single month. over the previous year, previous year, but a record for that particular one. So it's been incredible, and we couldn't have done it without Mr. Grantham being on the board.
Any other questions? Thank you, Drew. Appreciate it. All right. So last weekend, the Georgia Senate Republicans spent 2 or 3 days down in Savannah, and we noticed all the ships coming and going. But as I was leaving on Tuesday, I spotted what I thought may have been 2 jumpers on the Talmadge Bridge. But as we looked closely through our telescope, it was Senator Gann and Senator Clint Dixon up on top of that thing. I don't know what they were doing up there, but thank goodness you didn't jump.
Pre-planning for the $1 billion we're gonna spend to replace it.
You could have interrupted the transportation of goods coming and going through our border and our port. We're going to jump on into our agenda at 10:15. We're scheduled to have our first speaker, who is here today. It's Dr. Wes Clark, who is going to come and talk about the economic impact of infrastructure investment. So we're thankful to have you here, Dr. Clark. And as most of you were around a few years ago, House Bill 170 punched a great deal of money into our infrastructure in Georgia, and I hope we'll talk a little bit about that as we continue to see the big benefits from that. So y'all welcome Dr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's great to be with you this morning. And this project came about, I guess, in 2019. Then Chairman Kevin Tanner called us and asked that, we've increased the motor use fuel tax. We're raising more money. What are we getting for it, and what's the economic impact? And so this study was undertaken at that time. If you look, it's not in the slides, but if you look in the handout, just open the front cover and look at the table at the bottom on the right side. That shows the motor use fuel tax over from 2013 or fiscal year 13 through at the time the study was done, FY18. And prior to 2016, we had a 7.5 cent excise tax on fuel, plus a 3% state sales tax, and the local option sales tax. And what had happened is as vehicle efficiency had improved, there was growth, economic pressures tended to keep fuel prices low, so the Department of Transportation had expressed for several years a concern about the need to fund infrastructure. They had a backlog of projects that they needed to do, and so we changed the way we tax fuel. And Chairman Tanner said, well, what are we getting for this additional revenue? And the study that we did has 2 major components. The first estimates the economic impact of construction projects that were let and awarded by the Department of Transportation in fiscal year 2017. And then the second part of the study looks at the societal benefits. We monetize those benefits. Less congestion, less pollution, less vehicle emissions, increased efficiency in the roadway and so forth. And we did that second part by looking at 15 projects in metropolitan areas. Interestingly, if you came 316 over here to Athens, and when you crossed Highway 81, it was probably a little quicker than it was a few years ago. One of those 15 projects was that overpass at Highway 81 on 316. Oddly enough, I was working for the Senate Appropriations Committee when that project came up in 1991, and there were 2 options. If you may remember, 1991 was a budget downturn, the first one that people could remember at that time, and there were 2 options on the list. There was an option to build 316 the way it was built, and then there was the option to build it to interstate standards. And what was built was what we could afford at the time. And that's just the way it works. All right, so first we'll consider the economic impacts of the projects that were awarded in 2017. There was $1.46 billion for 383 construction and major capital maintenance projects, $105 million for 259 routine maintenance projects. That involves striping, sealing, upgrading traffic control systems and so forth, repairs. Another 108 million in design work and engineering. And then there was 156 million in local maintenance and improvement grants. To estimate the economic impact of these projects, we used M-Plan. It's a widely used and accepted county-level economic model of the United States. It uses data from over 500 industry sectors, and included in those sectors are two that are key here. One is for major road and bridge construction. The other is an industry sector for maintenance and repairs. So the model has data on these sectors, including economic output, employment, wages, salaries, and so forth. Jobs, labor, income, economic output, and then the economic multiplier. That's what we were interested in here. These are the major impact measures that we focused on for the study. We use the model to estimate the number of jobs, and then the model estimates the rest, and or it estimates labor, income, and economic output. And from that, we can calculate the economic multipliers. First, we estimated the number of direct employment jobs supported by the department's expenditures. That is the number of persons employed directly by contractors performing the work. Second, the model provides an estimate of indirect employment. That is jobs at suppliers, subcontractors, support industries, including transportation to get materials to those job sites. Finally, when those are persons employed in the direct and indirect positions spend their household income. As that household income increases, there's an induced effect. And most of these jobs are in the service sectors, retail, restaurants, things like dry cleaners, landscapers, but also attorneys, accountants, physicians, dentists, and so forth. And then the primary measure of economic output is, we call it economic output in this, on this slide. It's like gross domestic product. What is the total value of all goods and services produced as a result of this spending for road and bridge construction and repair? From the department's data, the data they provided on this, we were able to allocate expenditures to each of Georgia's 159 counties. Then we summed it for each of the GDOT districts. And M-Plan allows us to measure the impact, for instance, in District 1, but the model also tells us what impact that spending in District 1 has in the rest of the state. So we did that for each of the districts. We measured the direct impact inside the district and also the spillover effects into the rest of the state. We did this for all 7 districts. However, we decided that, there's, each district is a mix of urban and rural areas. So we made a separate model that was based on let's see if I can go back here. We made a separate model that was based on the USDA's RUCAs, the rural urban commuting areas that they use for their economic research service. And this allowed us to measure the impact in the urban areas as well as the rural areas. Statewide, those two models produced very similar results. The direct employment totaled about 11,600 jobs at road and bridge construction contractors, another 4,764 jobs at suppliers, contractors, and support services, and then an induced effect of just over 5,000 jobs. The labor income associated with all of this work was $3.35 billion. The handout you have has each of the 7 transportation districts and the impacts estimated for the RUCAs separately. So you've got that information, the transportation districts on the left, and then the RUCA study model that's there on the right. And you'll notice one thing about this, they're very similar. The results were very similar. The economic multiplier is 1.85 in one model, 1.87 in the other, and it suggests that the two models are very consistent. The research suggests that a $1 billion investment in road and bridge construction and capital maintenance, as well as the other maintenance, produces an additional $850 million in economic activity in the state. These findings are consistent with research that the President's Council of Economic Advisors and the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco did, that estimated nationwide $1 billion, any infrastructure investment has a nationwide multiplier of 2.0. So what this is saying is that the investment we've done here in Georgia has a multiplier of about 2.0, but we keep 85 to 87% of that economic activity here in the state. Only about 13 to 15% of that is leaking out from the purchase of goods and materials. There's always economic leakage in any transaction. Also, the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco had estimated that $1 billion of investment would support 13,000 jobs. So of the 13,000, we're keeping somewhere between 11 and 12,000 of those jobs right here in the state of Georgia. So there's very little economic leakage from road and bridge construction. I'll go through this real quickly. Turning now to the second part of the study, we used a model called TREDIS. This is a group up in Boston. And what TREDIS does is it takes the difference in a transportation system with and without a project and says, okay, what benefits do you get if you build this project? And so the folks over at GDOT ran their statewide transportation model and gave us a baseline result from that. Then we took 15 of these projects, and these 15 projects were $475 million. So not quite a third of what we spent on major projects. And we took those 15 projects in metropolitan areas and said, okay, run the state transportation model again with these projects. And what that does is it gives us a new estimate for trip times, both between counties and pass-through trips from outside the state. And running the model produced savings of about $5.7 billion over 10 years. Now, the major savings are $2.45 billion in vehicle operating costs from less congestion, quicker trip time, $2 billion from reduced accidents, injuries, and fatalities, $776 million in savings to business from greater productivity and reduced shipping costs, and then $489 million in reduced pollution because of emissions. And as the backlog of maintenance projects is completed, then we would expect the Department of Transportation to be building more of these kinds of projects. If you look at that $1.8 billion, a lot of that was capital maintenance, repairs, and so forth. But as Josh, you can probably tell me, as the department has worked through some of those backlogs of maintenance and capital improvements, a lot of the projects that are on the books now that are being led are producing the kinds of transportation system efficiencies that we saw from these 15 projects. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions. There's some additional copies of this up here on the table if anybody would like them.
We have a microphone up here if anyone has a question. If you would raise your hand. Dr. Clark, considering the recent activities in the economy and the pandemic, labor shortages, and obviously a lot of inflation concerns, price of materials going up as fast as they have, what do you think the impact that will have on studies like this and what we've done in the last 4 or 5 years with the investment in infrastructure?
Well, as was said by the previous speaker, said, the part of the problem we have right now is the just-in-time supply chain has been interrupted, and so you have a lot of problems that that are causing inflationary pressures. I read some things over the last week from economists at Moody's, and S&P, who said that's a major component of the inflationary pressures that we're seeing now. The thing about the transportation system, when we looked at these and modeled the improvements with credits, you do get shorter trip times, you get lower shipping costs, you get greater business productivity because that person who's making calls can get to one more call during the day because they haven't sat in traffic, that sort of thing. But one of the other things that a more efficient transportation system does for you is it means that workers have a greater number of jobs that they can choose from because they can get transportation, especially if it's transit, or if they can get faster in their personal vehicles. They have more employment opportunities because instead of being limited to maybe a very small area near their residence, they can get to a job that's a little bit farther away. The other thing, that benefits business as well, because a business located in a particular place now has a greater pool of potential workers that they can choose from, so that they can fill positions faster. They can, the thing about it is if a potential worker can get to more jobs, that has a tendency to drive up wages. But if the employer also has a greater pool to select from, that drives wages down. So that's kind of a wash. It's good for everybody. So transportation projects can provide tremendous efficiencies for the labor market.
One of the things that the pandemic taught us all was that not everybody has to go to work at their office every day. And I know my favorite DOT commissioner says, look, if you stay home, said you're not out there clogging up our highways. Said and a road that you're staying off of is the safest road to be on. So do you do any cost comparison for what does telecommuting do compared to investments in telecommuting and using our right-of-ways for rural broadband versus what's going on in traveling those right-of-ways?
I haven't looked at that personally. I've only read what I found in the literature. But you're right. It suggests that there are some agencies, state agencies, but also private sector companies that have decided that telecommuting. Some have decided telecommuting was a good thing, and they want to do more of it because it lowers travel costs for their employees to travel. This is the first in-person meeting I've attended in about a year and a half. Otherwise, Madison gave me the opportunity to do this from my office, which is about a 15-minute walk from here, 3 minutes by car. I don't have any current information on what that has meant, but I do know that there are organizations that are looking at traveling less.
Maybe respond to that too, is because that is a reality as there's more people teleworking continually, and hearing some Fortune 100 and 500 companies continuing that presence in Georgia, but our traffic data is telling us a little something different. They may be doing that, but people are still getting out and about. So they may work from home, and our travel patterns in the mornings are picking back up, but we did not see the upswing we thought we would when school went back. It actually stayed about the same before school went in, but mid-morning, midday traffic volumes are well ahead of where they were pre-COVID. So people are doing whatever they're doing in the morning, getting out and about midday, and then everybody likes to be home at the same time still. So afternoon volumes are back to reoccurring congestion. We're seeing the time of congestion continue to expand, and you throw in a wet day like today and a few crashes, and it feels like pre-COVID all again. So sort of interesting to watch the dynamic, because that traffic data really informs you sort of what society may be doing. And to that extent, it's great that they're teleworking, they're helping the morning commute, but midday, afternoon seems to be a lot different and increasing. That's the observation we've seen so far.
Yes.
Senator Rett, Georgia Senate. I was just going to add on to that. This morning when I drove here from Atlanta to Athens, I noticed a lot of people out on the highway. So I think it's a good investment in transportation infrastructure as we move along.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Yes, sir.
I'm actually going to do what you asked and grab the microphone. One question regarding Chairman Gooch's first question about inflationary pressures. So we know that they are different across different industries. There's different inflationary pressures. When we're looking at here this multiplier effect towards both jobs and economic activity with our investments in infrastructure, do you have a good idea about what inflationary pressures will do? I'm assuming that we're going to see a lower multiplier with increased inflationary pressures. I spoke with the commissioner early on about with the additional monies that we're investing in transportation infrastructure. The concern I have is if we're overloading the system, you're going to see increases in costs per mile or per project or whatever. And they've done a great job of limiting that, still getting a good cost per mile of what we're doing. But with the current inflationary pressures we're seeing, with trucking, with labor, and those costs are continuing to go up, raw materials, how do you think that is going to impact us going up? And how far down do you think the multiplier might come down?
Well, that's a very good question, and we have to look at it from two perspectives. We have to look at that original investment, the direct spending, the 1.8 or nearly $1.83 billion in direct spending. If we do that 1.83 billion in spending, that's going to pay, the laborers out there doing the work, and the contractors, the road and bridge contractors, and the suppliers of all the material, the steel for the guardrails, the asphalt, the landscaping materials, all of that, silk fence, you name it. That's all in there. If all of that costs more to do a project, we either spend more or we do less. The multiplier will probably be roughly the same unless there's some real anomaly in the cost of some component. But the multiplier would be the same for that industry. It wouldn't be, that would not be affected. What will be affected is how much we can do with the given dollars. Does that make sense?
It does. One follow-up?
Sure.
So our spending is somewhat static. So we're going to spend $1.83 billion on these projects that we're going to do. If that translates into just arbitrarily 185 miles of work on our, so we're not going to give transportation any more money. Instead of 185 miles, perhaps they're going to do 150 miles. So the bang for buck per mile, as it were, would necessarily come down because their costs go up. The General Assembly as a general are not going to add additional revenue. So we'll have fewer projects that we'll be able to do with the money that we allocate.
Right. So that second component of the study that we did, where we monetized the benefits of increased efficiency improvements, that's the part of this that would be affected if you build fewer projects with the same dollars because of inflationary pressures.
I have one just quick, that, if you don't know, that is Chairman Clay Perkle. He's our Transportation Appropriations Chair. He has some good questions like that. Thank you, Clay. So mine is that, when we talk to members that are not part of this study committee, they're going to look at, we're going to show them your very nice publication. Can we, it's 2017, really is when it's done. Can we use this and say it's similar in 2022? What's the differences we would need to point out to them? And as I hand this to a different member on the Transportation Committee or just in the House or the Senate.
Yeah, it's kind of the same answer to the previous question, that that multiplier effect will be roughly the same. Unless, like I said, unless there's something that's really an anomaly in the cost of supplies. And also as you work through transportation projects, at the time, we talked about a backlog of capital maintenance and major improvements or major maintenance. And now some of the projects may actually produce, a greater part of the projects may actually produce greater efficiency improvements. We found those 15 projects out of whatever the number was that really had major efficiency improvements. The rest of it was really just repairing the bridges that were needing to be replaced, and the commissioner probably can address that, or Josh Waller can address that. But this year I'm hoping that there's more than 15 projects that are producing efficiency improvements. So.
Yeah, I'll give the microphone. I think we have 16 this year. No, I'm just kidding. Just a little bit of commentary on the questions that Sheriff Perkle raised and Sheriff Gooch followed up on is, it is, I guess, simply less equals less. Inflationary pressures on construction commodities and labor is real. And David Muller's in here somewhere, or was, and there it is. We've been at the table with he and his membership for the last 2 weeks straight now, talking about those pressures that is showing up and is very real, especially relates to steel products, as you mentioned. Those are real pressures that exist. So we are seeing that erosion of buying power and expect that, and working hard to figure out how to mitigate that and try to de-risk some of the contracting methods going forward so that Georgians get good value for money and contractors are able to continue to work and get this direct benefit of 1.85 back to Georgia directly. We do have a few border cities that we have to work on, and contractors come in and out of Georgia, but that's okay. The notion of where we are too, and I just want to respond to this, is we have continued to make about the same levels of investment that when HB 170 went in place proportionally into capital maintenance and state of good repair, because again, that was the foundational platform of HB 170 back in the day, as Chairman Gooch knows. So we've continued to do that. We've been able to lift some of the major projects forward, corridor projects, capacity projects like the interchange at 81 and 316, and still to advance those, but the concern that Sheriff Perkle raises is a solid one that, less is going to equal less. And I would just, commentary is on top of what Riff led with today with what's going on in the supply chain, is this could be really sort of a doubling of impact. If we're doing less, you're getting less of the benefit of travel time, reliability, emissions, all the things baked into the calculus of M-Plan and the results here. It could be sort of a bad time. It just sort of compounds each other when you've got supply chain sort of backed up to begin with. So I guess that's a shameless plug that I was going to object to Sheriff Perkle's acknowledgement that the legislature may not find any funding for transportation. So I just want the record reflect that. Additional.
Any other questions? All right. Dr. Clark, it'd be great if we could find some resources over at Carl Vincent to update this. Because this study's about 3 years old already. And, you know, we did put the indexes on motor fuel tax. Every year it goes up. I'm not sure what the increase was this year, but Clay, the revenue does go up every year because of our great leadership and vision of indexing that motor fuel. But we want to also remind everyone of the increase in use of electric vehicles in our country. That's going to become a major issue in the near future. We better get in front of that now and not wait too long before we address it. I understand the F-150 comes out this year with electric vehicles. I'd love to have one, but not to avoid paying the gas tax, Commissioner, but just for the sake of having it. So we better be thinking about that. And now's the time to be working on it, not after you have 1 million of those vehicles on the road. It becomes more difficult politically to do something with policy. So I noticed when I turned around a second ago, our Georgia Chamber president walked in the room. So Wes Clark, great to have you here with us. It's a very important topic that we're working on, and it's great to have your leadership and your citizens, your members involved as well. So, any other questions of this speaker before we move on? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Jasper, you want to introduce our next speaker?
Sure, and thank you for letting us be your first meeting in a year and a half. On your table, you know, there's some L&J apples on some of the tables and out back, look, you enjoy them if you'd like to. Next up, we have pinch points in Georgia's infrastructure network. And you can see right up there, Bill, in the very top right corner, wave at us. We're good to see you. And he'll talk about our pinch points, and I'm sure he'll talk just in likeness. I look forward to hearing you.
Good to be here, at least virtually. My apologies for not being able to be in the room with you. Madison, it looks like I cannot share if someone else is sharing.
Okay, we just stopped sharing screen, so it should work now.
Okay, try this again. Good. Share. I don't have my teenage sons with me right now, so I'll do my best with the technology without them. How am I doing? How's that look?
That's perfect.
Fantastic. All right, well, let's dive in. So again, sorry I couldn't be in the room with you. Really would like to be. Just so you know a little bit about me, I run TTI's mobility division, Texas A&M Transportation Institute here in College Station, Texas. I've been at TTI about 26 years, really covering all and leading a group that really covers all things mobility, transportation system performance, freight mobility, urban freight, urban mobility sorts of issues. So a lot of what the commission is taking on, and I really commend the commission, and if I happen to say anything that sounds interesting, I would be happy to help out the commission in the future if there's some follow-up questions or anything that you may have of me. You know, I'll do my best to sort of speak to what I understand in Georgia in terms of what pinch points might be and really what some of the opportunities might be. But of course, I'm the guy from out of town, so I'm sure I'll miss the mark in some ways. But I think some of the techniques and tools and things I'll touch upon that are available can be helpful to inform sort of what the commission is charged with. And my other goal with this is to take a step back and sort of take a couple layers off the onion of what is causing some of these problems and what some of the possible solutions might be. And touched on some of that already, but I'll also give that a go. So with that, we'll move along here. And I probably have more content than we'll have time for, so if you find myself, if you feel like I'm going a little quickly, that may be partly intentional, because I understand you'll get the slides, so you can look at these things a little bit in further detail, and I just want to sort of focus on hitting the highlights for you. So I think fixing a lot of these problems starts with understanding it, and I think that's what our group does does a good job of at TTI, and something I'm rather proud of, is taking huge data sets and turning that into information to help us understand and inform some of these investment decisions, many that you've already started to talk about. So with that improved understanding, we can identify when, where people and goods and how they're using the system, identify those bottlenecks that might be in that multimodal system, and really inform the policy programs and projects that we need to have to identify some potential solutions. And the bottom line here for me, I always plug, is that it's really the right thing to do. Understanding and accounting for having a transparency in the process and being accountable for some of those investments, such as we're just spoken about, we're really kind of speaking my language when we start to talk about what the benefits are of what we're doing. I'm a co-author also at TTI of what we call our Urban Mobility Report, where we rank congestion levels throughout the country and at the area-wide level for different urban areas. And this is probably, we just released a report a couple months ago, and I think quite frankly this is why folks reached out to me initially. It helps us to understand sort of what the congestion trends have been in large communities. We've got about 101 that we have a congestion trend back to 1982. That includes Atlanta. Then we have a number of smaller urban areas that we look at. I'll share some of those results with you, but it just helps us to give kind of an overall of what's happening on the transportation system. In 2020, a bit of a crazy year, right? So if you look across our performance measures, they dropped about half, essentially. So here's some of the typical performance measures we use for 2019 and 20. The delay per auto commuter is a number that estimates just that. How many hours were you stuck in congestion in that particular year? And then we normalize it by the number of commuters that are in that community. So you can see it drop from 54 to 27. We always talk about what's that cost? What's that penalty in terms of wasted time and fuel on those individuals who get stuck in that traffic? So one for about $1,200. So that's an annual cost, about $100 a month in wasted time and fuel due to congestion. And then in 2020, it essentially dropped in half. A few more numbers, and you can reflect on these a little bit more if you'd like to later. There's some truck things in here. Second to last one that I've got there is the billions of truck congestion costs. So not only can we talk about what's the big number in total, we can also talk about what's that mean for trucks. So just the trucks is a little bit, you look at this 190 versus the 20, a little bit over 10% of the cost is actually wrapped up in the trucks. Of course, all these numbers dropped in half. Interesting to also see, we can have a conversation about the environment and what this might mean in terms of wasted fuel, second row, or the extra CO2 that's being produced. Interesting, you have to go really back to 1997 to find those total delay congestion numbers like what we had in 2020. So we, for all the wrong reasons, we really solved the congestion problem, especially in the spring with the stay-at-home orders, everything really dropped down. I thought all of you might like to take a look at this too. So here are a number of the different cities in Georgia that we cover. The bold numbers are the 2020 numbers. So Atlanta, recall, that's one that we have the data back to 1982. So you can see the delay per auto commuter was 37 hours, down from 78. So it was ranked 7th in 2019, dropped a little bit to 12 in 2020, and then dropped about half. And then you can see, relatively speaking, what these numbers are for some of the smaller cities throughout the state. And generally they're about all the same, right? They're running around $300 is the cost per auto commuter, and they're all down about half. But at an aggregate level, it starts to help you have a conversation about what is the impact at the urban area level for these different locations. If you're so inclined, you can also look at our website, and you'll have the link in these slides. This is just for Atlanta, so you can look at all these different performance measures, which I'm not going to bore you with, but you have drop-down menus, different years you can look at all the trends, you can see how the congestion breakdown is across different facility types, whether it's freeways or arterial streets. In Georgia, we only have this for Atlanta. It's one of the bigger locations. Now I'm shifting gears, and we've done some work with the Federal Highway Administration on what's called a Freight Mobility Trends tool. And this might also be informative for what the commission is doing, so if you go to this website, you'll see these links, click on these links, you'll be brought to a map that looks something like this, where you can drop down, and this is all trucks, so everything in here is about truck data. You can look at different performance measures, delay per mile, some of these different performance measures I'd be happy to talk about if there's interest at another time, but just know that there's a number of different mobility and transport and reliability measures in there. You can look at it across different roadway types, whether it's urban or rural, and then it will tell you sort of the congestion levels, and you can click on these different roads. This is one that's by urban area. So here I've clicked on the urban and rural areas. You can go in and look at it by MPO. You can see data dropping off. When we got into the stay-at-home orders, you can look at specific corridors through here and what the traffic volumes are, delays, and all these different performance measures. And then as you drill in to a particular location, it'll show you of the location you drilled into, what are the most congested bottlenecks. So it can certainly, I think it helped to inform what's happening on the system. And I'm sure Georgia DOT has some similar tools. We did it for the whole nation. I thought I would point this out for this group. One can also look at airports and different ports. And so on this one, we also have Savannah in there. So if you click on that, what you're going to get is specifically what's happening on the roads. This is just highway mode. But within about a 5-mile radius around the port, what does the congestion look like? So many of the same sorts of performance measures. In Texas, we do what's called the 100 most congested roadways analysis. Every year, and this is legislated, that the state must look at where's our most congested roadways. It helps to inform project selection for TxDOT. And so we go through this process, and TTI does it, it's my group, our group, our team. And we rank all of the different roadways at these segments throughout the state. And the big red here that you can't hardly miss is just intended to indicate to you that we not only look at the delay per mile, again we use delay per mile because the segments are different lengths, so it just helps us to normalize and compare everything. We not only look at kind of the total vehicles, which is this one, but we also break it out by the trucks. And you can see how the rankings sort of change. So if you're trying to have a conversation about just trucks, which this group probably is, or what's happening on the highway, you can have that conversation and you can tell that story. You'll also have, the website here for this. If you dig into it a little further, you can see some of the statistics and the visualization that we have for this as well too. I think we have huge data, you can imagine huge data sets that go into powering this stuff. And I think boiling it down into these visualizations is key, because I think that's what is most helpful to help inform decision making at the end of the day. We have a very truck-specific one as well in Texas that we developed, the truck congestion analysis tool. One can go in and look at any of these particular segments. You can actually build corridors up, identify the beginning and end points of your own corridors, and look at what the truck performance is on those. This is an example of what this kind of a tool allows you to do. On the left-hand side is freight delay. On the right-hand side is basically all the traffic that's included. So I-35 through Austin here, it's bad. If you've ever been near there, you know it's very, very congested. But what's interesting is not only is it bad on the right-hand side, but if you look over on the left, it's even worse for the trucks. So it helps us to start to have a conversation about, okay, where are those real pain points for the trucks? And they can and will be oftentimes different than what they are for the all-vehicle traffic. If you look at this Loop 1 over on the left-hand side, it's got less trucks on it. Less trucks go out of their bay over there, as opposed to all vehicles, which you can see is on the right-hand side, more congested. So another illustration. This is another one to just sort of plant a seed, especially from a planning perspective, when you're starting to look at these data and think about solutions. I've talked a lot about bottlenecks. So let's say this is Fort Worth, and at a specific time period, here's the bottleneck, but then the question becomes, who's stuck in that bottleneck? Where are they coming from? Where are they going? And is there anything we can do about that? So myopically, in the past, we might just look at that and say, oh, we got to widen it, right? Well, if we start to look at who is impacting it, in this case, we've got any trucks coming from South Dallas warehousing districts up to Intermodal Alliance facility over here, it starts to tell a story about the truck movements through here. And you could start to have a conversation about, well, maybe we can move some of our warehousing or our cross-dock facilities or something, intermodal facilities that are in this region to pull away to manage some of that freight. So it's just an example I use to help to point out the fact that it sort of informs possibly other solutions that could be out there. The other one I want to mention very quickly is freight fluidity. I know this is something that the Georgia Department of Transportation is also beginning to look at. It's the performance of trips for goods moving in your state or region. We started doing some work in this area about 10, 12 years ago for the economics group at Transport Canada in Canada, which is kind of like their Federal Highway Administration, because they were getting questions from the Chinese about how fluid their system was, essentially how reliable is their system to get goods from the west coast to the east side of Canada. And what this does is it really just provides an awareness of the goods that are moving in the region. It ties to the current economic conditions and supply chain opportunities. Then what you can look at are specific routes and look at specific bottlenecks on those routes. Way more here on the slide that I'm going to go through, but I want you to know that we put together a guidebook on freight fluidity, which might help to sort of answer some of the questions that the Commission is looking into. The first question is, what sort of resources are out there? This was very Texas specific. We did it for the Texas Department of Transportation. So if one has questions about key goods, it tells you what page to look at. If you're curious about the economic opportunities, where do you go? So on and so forth. And not only is it driven by what questions, but who is the leader? Who is the user? Is it somebody that's in the weeds looking at the map and wants to do the calculations? Is it someone more like probably the individuals in many cases listening to my voice right now who just need sort of the big picture of how does this fit into what we're trying to do and what is the story that it's trying to tell. And these are probably the three big questions we go into in the guidebook, which I think is something that might help the Commission also. You're really trying to identify what are those key goods, how are they moving around the system, where are the economic opportunities, and some of the tools and data sets to use those to disincentivize or incentivize particular types of industries you want, and then some very Texas specific tools. I've mentioned to you about how freight is moving along on these different corridors. We've taken this fluidity concept and actually done some work with U.S. Army and Corps of Engineers on ports as well. crowdsourced data from phones and sensors that we're getting the speed information from, and we have traffic volume information that we get from typically the state or federal highway administration to put together to get our delays on the highways. We can do something very similar with the pings that come off of those called AIS data on vessels, automated information system, and then we can use logs, voyage register is one, to get a sense of what those vessels are, to have conversations about what kind of capacity is being impacted, what's the time it's taking to go through the system, what's the time that you're stuck in these different berths. So this data can be very informative. And the next question then is, lots of PhD stuff on this slide. You can ignore all that. I want you to just read that big blue thing I put in the middle there, that big blue bullet. The question becomes, all right, you got all this stuff on the roads, Bill, and you got all this insights on the vessel. How can we start to connect it? So the question becomes, a vessel comes in, what's the impact on the highway system? So we've looked at this in Brownsville, Texas, at the port there, and a few other places. And we can start to have conversations about, in this line that you've already read, so a vessel that comes in and is carrying 1,000 TEUs, what's that translate into in terms of the number of trucks that week, and then weeks before and weeks after? It's kind of interesting to look at that. It's kind of an area we're still looking at. They aren't necessarily perfect, and this was all pre-COVID, so certainly we're in a different world, as we've already talked about, but I think that's where the decision making needs to go next. So those are some of the tools and things. Now I want to take a quick step back and just talk about the e-commerce, the implications of these urgent deliveries that we have on the transportation system. Systems obviously worldwide. We've talked about this. I'm going to kind of go through that pretty quickly. But this is what it sort of boils down, and those individuals in the private sector that are in the room and that are going to speak also can speak to this even more, but it's all about hitting their delivery windows, right? So what does this impact mean if we are public agencies trying to plan our transportation system? What that means is when we're clicking add to cart and purchase, those individuals have to have a product closer to us. And so warehouses, distribution centers are going to be moving closer to customers. They're going to need more trucks to make their turns, especially if things are congested. Access to the curb becomes a really huge issue. And I just sort of wanted to help at least illustrate a few of these things. So the question becomes, how do we handle this in our transportation plans, and how do we plan for this really through conversation between the public and private sector? We've touched on some of these other challenges to truck deliveries. We've got, right now there's way more demand, not enough trucks. We've got the silicon chips shortage, aluminum shortages, prices are going up. Always have a driver shortage, which really the ATA will tell you rightfully it's a driver retention issue. They're getting plenty of drivers, but they leave about 90% of them after the first year. And this battle for the curb. Just a couple of slides on curbside management, which I think is going to be a hot topic into the future, is a hot topic. It really is, the Institute of Transportation Engineers has said it's at this nexus of transportation, land use, and economic development. And there's a high value in the curb. And there's a lot of people using the curb. You can skim through these, it's no surprise, but it's balancing all of these different users that are fiercely trying to get to that curb, and it has a tremendous amount of value. So the planning perspective, how do we balance that curb use? This is something for this audience would be in large areas. I see some of this certainly in Atlanta, possibly in Savannah, and a few of the other places. Picture's worth 1,000 words. It's been a while since I've been in Atlanta. You can get back there, but I'm sure you have similar images there where there's so many uses and deliveries that are occurring that are impacting the curb, and things you really don't think about until you see photographs of it. And I'm sure this happens in Atlanta too. In New York, I think UPS in 2018 paid $34 million in parking tickets. You can see a nice stack of parking tickets on this truck in New York City. They don't pay them. They just don't pay it. It's just a part of the cost of doing business. They try to have agreements with the city, and it's basically just a surcharge. So if you send something to New York City, that's why they ask you the zip code, not only to get it there, but to understand also how much extra you're going to pay for parking and all these other issues. I'll let you look at these slides a little bit later in the interest of time, because I want to make sure I get to my final thoughts and then maybe save us a couple minutes for any questions that might come up. But these are some of the solutions for curb management, and there's some got some colleagues over in the consulting world that have looked at, okay, how do we look at putting some sort of quantifying that parking space value, and they've looked at that. Here's a couple of other things. Oftentimes in both urban and rural areas, so I think this is something that would be applicable throughout Georgia. The delivery driver comes to a large skyscraper and then doesn't know exactly where to deliver. So having specified locations within buildings for deliveries can help to increase that utilization of the curb and get them in and out of there faster. Lockers work, and this is also a rural issue as well. Rural routes in Texas, this is one. I'm sure it's similar in Georgia too, where I was really out in the middle of nowhere in Georgia, and those drivers have to drive all over to find the place to go. Well, I found a little convenience store that sure enough has one of these lockers that can provide a central location for this. Technology is certainly coming, and it's something that we need to plan for when we talk about urban mobility, urban freight movement, and some of the potential solutions that are out there. These are the neuro robots that we have in Texas, California, Arizona, delivering pizza. I tell you, if you want a glimpse into the future, one thing to look at is see what Amazon is patenting. So I've done that. Underground warehousing, underground conveyors. The stuff is all real. It's all patents, the things that they're looking at. Running it just like a utility of sewer or water or anything else right under the ground. Hives of drones. And there's not much space in urban areas, so how can they're looking at ways to use ponds and reservoirs and water places to put airtight underwater bins that can, with a radio sensor, you can go in and pick out what you need, or even going to the sky with some of these technologies. A couple more trains that go through that have the drones on them providing the supplies. The trickiest part with drones is the drop off and take off. So dropping a chute down and then dropping the package into the chute. Now the future really is now. A lot of those solutions are, again, they're patented. A lot of these things are here. Industry is looking at them. Some of it's pretty Jetsons still, kind of out there a ways. But one thing, I get a lot of questions. What about technology industry? This or that catch on? And I tend to tell people if it's reliably and safely helping them hit their delivery windows, then it'll be in the running in the conversation. So the last 4 slides, these are some of my final thoughts, and I'll try to. Like I said, I'm not from around there, so I may be a little bit off, but I think things that are sort of perennial and sort of ubiquitous, I will pass along here. And then a couple ideas that might be helpful locally. So obviously this group sort of gets it, that there's a really long supply chain behind the person who shows up with the package. And a lot of things have to go right to get it to you. We're starting to see what happens when there's some issues in that. There's implications to all of this just-in-time delivery, and there's a lot of people and stakeholders involved. And as I look down the list here with the commission, I'm pleased to see that we have a lot of these folks in the conversation. And it's always my joke that they tell people about freight transportation is only important if you eat or buy anything. otherwise it's not relevant to you. So it certainly is something that's relevant to everybody. And I think there's really no time as now to have this conversation as people are starting to see empty shelves. Nothing makes people pay more attention to their supply chains than not being able to find toilet paper and water and sanitary wipes, etc. Getting to solutions, as this group understands, is the need for a great plan, and Georgia has a very nice one, but having unified goals and visions, understanding the problem, which I'm hopeful that some of the tools and techniques I've briefly shown you can help you get there. Getting the right data and having the right analyses to power those visualization can help us then get to the right mix of places, projects, programs, policies in the right place for the right mode. And then it's about identifying the funding sources to get there. And I took a stab at this. Again, I'm not local, but there are things at the federal level. Certainly there's federal freight formula funds that are available. There's infra grants at the federal level. I've had some staff and colleagues at TTI who have done some work in Georgia, so they were familiar with the One Georgia Authority, which provides some exceptional opportunity, perhaps to fund things, particularly rural areas, all modes. You've got toll revenues, public-private partnerships, and a lot of downtown development authorities at the local level, which may be possibilities for funding. And then these are my question mark, but a couple of projects or studies that I might put out there that just from observation is, with so many different funding opportunities, looking at ways to leverage those previous funding opportunities from the prior slide across critical supply chains. For example, the Georgia Center of Innovation from Georgia's Economic Development has looked at particular supply chains. So maybe looking at ways to look at how goods may move through a location. So beginning first at location A, you got a first last mile location and perhaps a small town, rural highway where downtown development authority and One Georgia Authority funds might be appropriate. Then you have some line haul segment that connects those, maybe freight formula or infra funds are appropriate, and then maybe it goes to a port or intermodal connector where you could look at freight formula or some of these other funding sources I mentioned there. I got my acronym wrong for infra, but you know what that is. Another thought is potentially using, this is quite possibly already being looked into, using the I-75, the commercial vehicle lanes as a pilot for freight traveler information system, and one that could probably be expanded from through I-16 to Savannah, I-75 south to the Florida-Georgia state line. Data is critical in powering a lot of what we're talking about, so maybe research into more and different and innovative data sources to help us understand, again, what's moving in there, whether that's electronic logging devices, waste station truck ID records, and so forth. Looking at the issue of truck parking, so maybe looking at incentive programs to encourage expansion of the private sector truck parking and truck stops, and particularly around distribution centers and warehousing areas. And the last one, I heard a little bit about electric vehicles, so maybe research on the power generation needed to accommodate those, and so some of the heavy-duty trucking in the state as well. So wrapping up there, these are contact info, a few more websites. Oh, I also chair, for those of you familiar with the Transportation Research Board, I'm chair of the Urban Freight Transportation Committee, and this paper that I've listed here is kind of interesting. It looks at what we've learned in the past and sort of where we've been and where urban freight delivery might be going into the future. And so you can hit that website if you'd like for a little bit of information on that. So no, it was a bit of a whirlwind tour, but I think that brings me to the end of my prepared remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. A lot of data for sure. And just thinking about that, Rick Jasper is one of the co-chairmen. How receptive are county, local leaders to data like this? And I think that's what I run into sometimes is, we get it at our level, but getting it down to where they can get it, sometimes there's a bit of it, it's more difficult, or not that they're dumb or anything, it's just a lot of information. And do you find that in Texas, or what do you do to overcome that?
Yeah, well, there's getting it and getting it. Do you mean getting it, like getting the message, and then there's also the part about getting the data. I think you're sort of talking about getting the data. I think it can be harder in some of those local areas. I think even in Georgia, you've got some very informed MPOs in those areas, so that's over 50,000. But even those smaller places, we've had some success with the messaging of helping them understand the criticality of their supply chains, that they're certainly integral to that too. And in many cases, ag in Texas is very important, ag in Georgia is very important as well. So that's one example where at the local level, there may be just a few farmers at the end of that, one end of that supply chain, but they certainly understand the need to get that product back to places that need it. So they can sort of understand the messaging, and then understanding the data. It's trickier. I think there's probably is some hand-holding there, and those data sets can be kind of large, and so that's probably where having consultants or somebody from one of your universities step in and help with that, to help collect all of that information and turn it into those messages. That's helpful for them. But I certainly would see a path forward with that. One example in Texas is the Permian Basin, all the energy explosion. No pun intended, horrible pun. But the boom in West Texas oil and energy, and getting that moved around, we were able to use some pretty innovative data, because we would literally overnight have oil wells popping up. Well, how are we going to find them? Because they're not telling us about them. They're not telling us, they're not asking for permits for these driveways. So we had to get some of these innovative data sets that would show us where vehicles were going, and actually use some of that to find out where some of the driveways and where some of these vehicles were turning into what used to be just dirt roads out in the middle of nowhere. So there's some innovative ways, I think, to get there.
Well, thank you. I, for one, had not even thought much about the curb dilemma, this interview that you brought up. That is a big issue.
Bill, Steve Gooch, North Georgia, and I guess we're sitting in the center of UGA's campus, so everyone in the room here, I think it's safe to say, is pulling for you next Saturday night.
Right out of the gate, I was going to acknowledge the fact that I wish I was there where a winning football team was present, but I decided to let it go. Maybe next time I can join you.
Good luck next weekend, but
Right.
all your research that you've done, can you point us to a state that has done extremely well in identifying funding to fix some of their mobility issues with freight logistics? So I'm talking about a blended approach, using your railroads as your partner as well. Truck lanes, whatever, and I feel like Georgia's well on its way to developing a good freight plan through our DOT, but our biggest challenge that this group faces will be how to fund it. Do you know of any examples of states that have done that, or that are ahead of us and where we are today?
First off, I would commend Georgia and the commission and what you're doing. Like you said, you're certainly heading in the right direction. You've got the legislative authority to do it. You're looking at the innovative ways to do it. The reality is, for all the states, the needs are just too great for the available funding, and we're all sort of struggling with that. So I think in Texas, I would say we're doing as good a job as as anyone with that. It certainly helps that we've had, I think, several years of presenting the message effectively about what happens if we don't do anything and what that cost is of not doing anything. And it's a tremendous cost. And helping to understand kind of per capita what the value is of spreading those costs out. And we've had some innovative financing opportunities. I am not an economist, nor do I play one on TV, but I work very closely with our group that does the work on this. And so if there's need for more information on the specifics with that, I can do that. But I tried to look up a few of the unique ideas or unique opportunities that Georgia has, and pointed to a few of those in that last slide. I don't think I'm coming up with anything you don't know about. So I think it's more about getting local participation and getting everybody on board to support that.
Hey Bill, this is Wes Clark with the Georgia Chamber. I was trying to do some quick math at the beginning of your presentation on the napkin here, and it appears that congestion in Atlanta more or less doubled in about 20 years. So I'm curious, is that a good rule of thumb that you've seen nationwide? Is that a rule of thumb for us to look at the next 20 years? Or is that just an anomaly in the math?
That's probably not too far off, Chris, now that you got me thinking about that. The world was hard enough to predict before it got flipped upside down. But for those areas that are growing, for those areas that have the population growth, and I put Georgia in that category, that continued congestion growth is going to be there. To be honest with you, I should point out we do have those trends of the congestion data, particularly for Atlanta, all the way back to 1982. So you wouldn't even need to put pencil to paper. You could actually look at the graphs that we have to specifically answer that question, and look right up to pre-COVID, to the 2019 numbers, to see what that looks like. In some places, that doubling is probably a little bit quicker. It just depends on what you see in terms of job growth and population growth.
Thank you.
Good morning, how you doing? This is Doc Senator Rhett.
Yes, sir.
When we look at freight logistics, some states have a separate section on the highway for trucks. And with the deepening of the harbor here in Savannah, Georgia, we've given that some thought here, along with widening the highways, because we have a lot more trucks coming around. But I might have missed it, but in Texas, have you all entertained that thought, or what are your thoughts on that in terms of facilitating?
Yeah, we've entertained the thought, and we've looked at it. We haven't put anything on the ground just yet. We have kind of like what you have in Georgia and Atlanta. We've got places where we don't allow the trucks, or lanes that we suggest that the trucks operate in, much like what you have in Atlanta. But honestly, we're sort of looking at jaw and what you're looking at doing with your CBL lane, the commercial vehicle lane there, because honestly, you're on the edge of that innovation in that regard. I wish I had a better answer. I think we all talk about that and how we think that could be a really good solution. We're just not seeing a lot of the investment in it just yet.
Any other questions for Bill?
Yes, I have one. Mr. Chairman, this is Calvin Stark. Can I ask you a question?
on a Zoom.
Oh, hey there, Laura, Kellen, good to see you.
Hey, how you
Good,
doing?
sorry, go ahead.
All rise.
I want to ask you a question about the congestion. You had the chart up that said 2019 to 2020. And on one, you were saying the number of, did you say the number of hours per, we should put that back up, the one that had the,
I had a couple, Representative. Was it that one, or that one?
right
This
there,
is,
there you go.
yeah, this is probably the local numbers.
Tell me about because when we calculate our congestion costs, and it's been determined, to be in millions. How do y'all I'm just curious how you calculate that, if somebody, the length of time in the car, because I think that's gonna be a big item for us from an explanation and having empirical evidence. I know Wes Clark asked about that. And to me, when we start talking and trying to influence the public, because this is gonna cost us, we gotta find some source of revenue. And in order to do that, we've gotta be able to explain to them in a way that this will save us money, from a time standpoint, because congestion is a cost to the business and it's a cost to the people sitting in their cars on time. So explain that to me, that the delay per auto commuter and what that means in terms of cost.
You got it, Senator. Yeah, so the delay per auto commuter is the time you are stuck in traffic and the total delay for that. The per auto commuter part of it is we have a sense of how many commuters there were in that particular urban area. We have ways to estimate that, use census data to collect that. So what we do is basically combine the two. I should point out a couple of things that are really important here. This is the delay per auto commuter, so this is an individual number. It means something to you as a commuter in that area. We also have the big, very large numbers, right? What's the total delay in that particular urban area? So we have the aggregate numbers, and then we have what's it mean to the individual. As far as the details of computing it, we have pretty extensive methodologies, and I would be happy to speak with staff or others about some of those details at another time if you'd like to. When we talk about the cost, we focus on the wasted fuel, so how much extra fuel is wasted being stuck in congestion, and what's the wasted time. And certainly we use a value of time on that. And it's different because we have an estimate of what the vehicle mix is out there. It's different between cars and trucks.
What would you gain dollars to be annually just in Georgia based on your evidence, your figures?
Oh, the total hours in the state of Georgia?
Yeah, I'm saying, how much are we losing, what does it cost us from a production standpoint yearly on congestion in the state of Georgia?
Yeah, I can come back with that number.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. And Representative Smyrie, or should I say Ambassador Smyrie, this is Steve Gooch. Thank you for being online with us today. I don't think Bill realized he was talking to the next ambassador of the Dominican Republic. Bill, I have a follow-up question on this slide. Looking at pre-pandemic congestion, last year's slowdown obviously impacted the entire nation on traffic, and congestion was impacted in a good way for a short period of time. What do you think the trajectory of that is in the recovery phase? I feel like we've already gotten back to where we were pre-pandemic. Do you agree, nationwide and specifically in Georgia?
Yeah, honestly, looking out your window is probably as good an estimate as I have, but you're right. And my answer seems to change. When we release this report, 2 months ago, we felt like we were starting to turn the corner, right? And if I spoke to reporters, they would look out the window and say, look, Bill, we're already coming back. And so my answer would be the same, that those places that are creating jobs, those places that have strong economic prosperity, growing in population, are going to see that recovery much quicker. Those places that can adjust to this new normal quickly and get product and services to people and keep things moving will certainly be at an advantage. So I suspect you're seeing that in Atlanta, and I would tend to agree. We're seeing it in Texas, where we're keeping things moving and we've got a robust economy. But not all places are that way, so we can't make that general statement everywhere.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much for being with us, and we hope to see you again soon, even if it's on the football field.
Very good. Take care. Thank you.
We will take a real quick 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and continue with our agenda.
No, you need Chris. Yeah.
We're going to try to get everyone out.
No, not my voice.
Is that right? Could I have your attention? Will you hear me? Nobody's listening. I'm gonna have to turn Frank in loose. Our next presenter this morning is Sandy Lake from the Center of Innovation for Logistics, and she will be here to talk about transportation infrastructure's role in economic development. Sandy, welcome, and thank you for coming and being a part of this event in Athens today.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me. I am representing not only the Center of Innovation for Logistics, but the Georgia Department of Economic Development, and talking to you today about transportation infrastructure role in economic development. And I recognize that my time on the agenda has already expired, so try not to go too fast, but we'll keep this moving. But this is, obviously, you can probably guess, what is the #1 question that we get asked most often when it comes to economic development? And it has to do with congestion, because obviously we have some notoriety, especially in the metro area, with that issue. But what helps us in selling the tremendous products that we have, the tremendous products that we have as a state with our infrastructure, is the fact that we've got a plan. And we can point to that plan, we can point to those investments, and we can let these prospects know that Georgia is actively pursuing solutions to this congestion issue. But transportation costs are a tremendous pressure, and it's only getting worse right now with all the chaos in the supply chain. But what this producer price index versus transportation costs shows you, just from the manufacturing, U.S. manufacturing perspective, what they're dealing with in transportation costs. And this starts in 2016. I know you can't see this very well, but this little section right here is 2020. Of course, that shows you the dip that Dr. Easel was talking about that helped to ease up some of the pressure on congestion. It also dropped the price because everything stopped at that point. But then when we kicked back up post-pandemic, it has skyrocketed. And everybody knows the pain points with truckload. This is just showing truckload. Parcel is the black line, the red line is LTL, and the gold line is truckload. And of course, this just goes through May 2021, and you can see that it's just heading up, with maybe some hope of it coming down in 2023 is kind of what they're talking about now. But even with those kinds of issues and pressures, Georgia has been able to be successful in economic development because, like I said, we have a great product to sell. We actually had a banner year in FY21 results. That's July 1, 2020 to June 30, 2021. We increased our total investment by 46% over the previous record year, and that previous year was a $7.4 billion investment even during the pandemic. So we have quite the advantage in our uniquely complete infrastructure. But what people mostly think about when they think about infrastructure and logistics, they think about our physical infrastructure of road, rail, air, and ocean. But that is tremendous. But what we also sell is the fact that in addition to that, it takes both the physical infrastructure as well as the digital infrastructure and the financial infrastructure working together harmoniously to make a supply chain successful. And we've got that capability as well, as I'm going to point out to you. So I'll run through these advantages because you're very well aware of these. But being close to markets is one of the key things that we're able to share, is that within a 2-day truck drive, you can reach 80% of the U.S. population. Distance equals dollars in this business, and so the closer you can get to these markets, the more advantageous you can be in being a global gateway to the Southeast, the largest population sector within the country. It gives us a tremendous advantage to sell. And like I said, being able to show that we're making investments in key strategic pain points and corridors throughout the state, that we have a plan, is tremendous in helping to ease their minds about some of the pinch points that we just were talking about. We also have the most extensive rail network in the Southeast. Atlanta is home to the largest intermodal hub in the U.S. east of the Mississippi. We have tremendous intermodal connection, which we'll talk about more coming from the port. But having this extensive rail network service with 2 Class 1 railroads in our state that are also available on terminal at our port is a tremendous advantage that we enjoy. We have been named the most efficient airport. We're inching back up to being the world's busiest airport again, but we lost that moniker a little bit during the pandemic, but we're still number 2. So that gives us, as we get back to being busier, go ahead.
Did we lose the busiest airport because our passenger traffic is higher percentage-wise than our freight traffic?
It was based on passenger traffic. Right now, it's Guangdong, China, I think, is technically the busiest in terms of passengers. But that passenger freight equates to more belly capacity for freight capacity. So, even during the pandemic, that when some of that passenger capacity had to be grounded, they turned some of those passenger planes into what they call freighters, where they were continuing to move air cargo through passenger planes as well. And of course, we have our tremendous port asset. That is our beacon within our state that we certainly gives us a huge advantage for our international investors. It is the 4th largest and fastest growing port in the U.S., the westernmost East Coast port, which obviously translates into fewer miles to get to major metropolitan areas. The Griff and the board, Mr. Grantham here, have made tremendous investments in creating an outstanding port model that is unparalleled in the business. And so we are blessed with tremendous leadership at our port that has been very visionary and very aggressive in making these investments, which has given us lots of advantages to sell as a strategic gateway. We have 37 weekly carrier service options. As I mentioned, we have the rail service on terminal. We are able to be faster to market. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. We have matchback opportunities, and we have, as Griff pointed out, we have a great relationship with our partners at the ILA and others that help us to be able to continue to be a shining star on the East Coast. And because of our progression in our harbor deepening, and which will end up, I think, is on track to finish the end of this year, enables us to handle these kinds of ships. This was the Marco Polo that called on Savannah in May, and we were able to accommodate that because of the investments that we've made in our harbor deepening. We also have tremendous interstate connectivity to our port, and that is a tremendous asset. Our trucks don't have to go through a major metropolitan area to get outside of Savannah. That's huge. We have great connectivity to I-16 and I-95, and as you well know, there's also construction projects being worked in these areas right now to help alleviate the pinch points that we have there. The Mason Mega Rail Yard is another improvement that the port has made to be able to enhance the rail service connectivity to key inland destinations, Chicago, St. Louis, the Ohio Valley. It has not only cuts transit time, but it enables the building of longer trains so that we can be more efficient in our reach into the heartland. And then, of course, we have this very strategic inland port strategy. That's another selling point product that we're able to offer as a state. Appalachian Regional Port is already exceeding its goals and targets when it was put into effect. And right now, there's development underway for a northeast inland port. Other ports are being proposed, but inland ports, but those are the ones that are actually coming online or are already online. And then this is just a quick overview of the new projects that the port has been actively involved in and their timelines in the very near future. But you probably are all aware of the recent $34 million infusion that was approved to add an additional 1.6 million TEU capacity, which, if I understand, is coming on already at the end of 2022 and is projected to be complete in 2023. So again, that's just a further evidence of our approach at being able to be agile in our response to unprecedented events like a pandemic, like an avalanche of cargo that's coming to our port that nobody could have even predicted. So we have the ability to respond, and fortunately respond quickly in those situations. And a lot of that has to do with our unique model in being a single terminal operator. We also have the warehousing capacity to be able to support this kind of growth and incoming cargo as well as export cargo. You'll see these major retailers, both e-commerce as well as cold storage. We have the 8th largest refrigerated space capacity of any U.S. state with over 80 plus cold chain facilities. This is a tremendous asset for a cold chain. We're a tremendous attractor of food processing. You may have noticed several announcements over the last couple of years with meal kits, because not only of our proximity, our infrastructure, and our cold storage, we became a very attractive place for that. We've become a very attractive space for e-commerce, and that's what Radial is, a large e-commerce provider. Amazon has continued. They just last week opened up a facility in Columbia County that is very robotic intensive, but they have continued to make announcement after announcement in our state because, again, of our connectivity and our access to markets. And then the other thing that is an advantage that we don't often think about is we have the world's fastest information networks based in Metro Atlanta. Metro Atlanta is a key southeast hub for fiber optic infrastructure. Not one, but two of the nation's largest fiber optic trunk lines actually intersect in Atlanta, along with two major research lines, which our universities take advantage of. They also intersect there in the metro area. We have the advantage of being a core interconnection point for nearly every international and domestic fiber provider. AT&T, Comcast, Google just made another big announcement. Microsoft just made a big announcement here. But we're able to offer tremendous internet gigabyte speed and service. And then as a state, we're making great strides in increasing our broadband connectivity. Currently, we're ranked as 12th in broadband access, which is not bad, but we want to do better. And we're already making investments and working toward that infrastructure as well. But that kind of speed and network infrastructure helps support our growing technology community. And within, we're already kind of seen as the Silicon Valley of the Southeast. Within that, we have identified 141 companies specifically working in the logistics and supply chain technology space. And those 141 companies are generating $10.4 billion of economic impact. This supply chain and technology cluster, not only are we a cluster here, but these 20 of the top supply chain and logistics technology employers in Georgia are also headquartered here in Georgia. Some of these names that you might be familiar with are Dramatic, Chef, Manhattan Associates. Those are just some of the key supply chain and technology providers that we have here, as well as Canal. They have also announced their headquarters here as well. We were in a 2017 study, so this is a little bit dated, but Deloitte did a study and ranked us number 2 for digital supply chains. We're second only to New York in that space. But as I mentioned before, it takes the digital as well as the financial infrastructure, and so many of our data science and fintech ecosystem members are also leaders in the supply chain and logistics technology space. Companies like Agilytics, NCR, Verison, RoadSync, and we've made some big headlines lately in our logistics and technology infrastructure space with investments. We actually, these companies that are listed here in these headlines, were actually incubated and nurtured here in Georgia. Stored is a flexible storage brokerage that recently got a $90 million infusion in capital, which skyrocketed them to being valued at over $1 billion and earning them the label of a unicorn company that was actually started and grown right here in Georgia. Verison is another company that was nurtured and incubated in ATDC, the Advanced Technology Development Center here, and they recently got an $8 million infusion in capital, and they decided to make their headquarters here. So as we are garnering greater investment, it's helping these new startups to stay here. That was an issue that we were having a few years ago, is these companies would start here and then they'd get lured away. But now that we're able to attract more capital and investments into Georgia's technology community, we're actually seeing these companies thrive and stay here. So that's been another advantage. So I ran through that very quickly. I'm happy to answer any questions, but just to sum it up, kind of what appeals to our prospects is our unprecedented connectivity. Being able to offer all modes, anytime, anywhere you need to go, you can get to. You can be agile here. You can go between modes when you have things come at you like a pandemic that you couldn't have expected. We have that proximity to major markets, which gives us a tremendous advantage. We have a tremendous education system, both in our university system as well as our technical college system that has very specific expertise in logistics and supply chain, everything from our entry-level folks that are needed on the front lines of warehousing to our data scientists and logisticians that are needed to work out these very complex supply chain issues that they're faced with every day. And then it's also very attractive that we have a lot of suppliers. not only do we have tremendous manufacturing here and tier 1 suppliers, but we're attracting the tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers, and that is also makes us an attractive state to locate in. And then we also offer the Center of Innovation. I lead the logistics team for that, but that's a component of Georgia's Department of Economic Development, and that also gives companies a way to be able to plug into this industry, get expertise about this industry, and quickly accelerate solutions for getting connected to the types of service providers they needed, but also taking all of this at a statewide look of how can we continue to be innovative and help companies clear the path to innovation and growth in our state. So being connected to the commission, being connected to our Department of Transportation, to our port, to our airport, all of these relationships that Georgia is good at cultivating between all of our economic development partners all around the state gives us another advantage that other states don't have, because they don't have the relationships and communication that we have here in our state to be able to make companies be successful here quickly. So I'll end with that. If there's any questions, go ahead.
Sandy, thank you for being here today and for your insight. You're sort of the gatekeeper for all these new deals that we're seeing in Georgia, and you talk about all the successes and some of the companies that are coming. Talk about some of the ones you haven't gotten. Has the issue of congestion and the difficulties that we're facing now with what this commission is facing, has that been an issue that's been brought up as the reason why the prospects did not choose Georgia?
Well, that's a good question. So not always. It's not always about, sometimes other states throw more money at a project, quite frankly. And so they're able to be attractive because they offer incentives that we're a little bit smarter about, and we're not willing to go there necessarily because it wouldn't help us in the grand scheme or the bigger picture. Georgia does a very good job at having smart incentives and smart packages, but there are times when other states will just simply throw more money at it. The other thing is, it really has to do with total, depending on the company and what it is they're producing and where their customers are. Sometimes it just comes down to what's the total landed cost, and can they make it work by using our infrastructure versus maybe a neighboring state's infrastructure. That's one of the things that we do at the Center of Innovation when we get a lot of these logistics dependent projects, is do sort of that high level comparison of transportation costs. And there are times where we're just not able to compete on that cost of transportation in the greater scheme of where they're having to move their products. And so they will sometimes locate differently just for that aspect.
So follow-up question, as we continue to see the Port of Savannah and Brunswick become more and more successful, growing every year, they just continue to hit their targets and beyond, continue to become the #1 state to do business now, the 8th year in a row. We know that population growth continues to increase in Georgia, but we're not keeping up financially with the needs to expand our infrastructure. We need more roads, we need more bridges, we need more Class 1 railroad expansions. So the need for those projects are going to have to be funded, and we know it's going to cost billions of dollars to do so. The question is, how do we pay for that? Will your prospects and your companies that we're seeing come to Georgia, will they come to the table and be willing to have that discussion to help pay for those expansions and that investment? What's your thoughts on that? And if you think they will, how would they be willing to pay for it?
Right. I don't really have that crystal ball, but what I do know is we can't build our way out of it. We have to get smarter with our technology. Just like it takes these projects several years before they're able to really pay off because of the long tail that it takes for these projects to be built and come online. We're simultaneously working at the technology to be able to make better collaborative matching of loads so that we can eliminate a lot of this backhaul and eliminate the numbers of trucks on the road potentially, and create faster, more efficiency because we're able to be more collaborative in these things. So having the model of what we have experienced and been successful with is not really going to be sustainable, is what a lot of the research is showing. And so they're looking at how can we continue to be smarter in our execution of logistics so that we can take the most advantage of the capacity that we currently have and not necessarily completely rely on infrastructure expansion to help solve that problem. Does that make sense?
If you could break it down to a simpler sentence for a country boy, how do you do that? If you're shipping a widget from China to North Georgia, how do you get it there without using a railroad, a truck, or an airplane?
Oh, you definitely have to use.
Yeah. So well, give me some examples of what you're saying.
So right now, you have shippers that use dedicated equipment for a designated truck lane. And some of that, if they're not sharing that capacity with other shippers, that capacity is coming back less than full. Where it maybe there could be with more collaboration or openness between shippers to share data, then those loads could be matched up more efficiently and go together versus, two trucks. Maybe they could go in one truck.
Yeah, I think that's a good thought. I think some of the truckers in the room can tell you they've been doing that for years, the brokers and all that.
That's right.
And they'll continue to make that more efficient.
Right.
But we know, and I think the commissioner will tell you that they're working on a great plan. He and Janine are going to bring forward a great logistics plan and a freight plan. But what they're not bringing to us is a way to pay for it. And so we're going to have to come up with billions of dollars to implement the plan. Am I correct, Commissioner? And so the question I keep pushing, I guess you may not have an answer today, and that's fine. Who will pay for it? Are the companies that are moving here willing to step up and help us foot the bill for that as a user and not pass it on to a taxpayer as a consumer? Ultimately, we all pay for it at the end as a consumer, but will the users pay for it like we do today with gas tax or diesel tax or what have you? And I won't keep pushing you for an answer on it, but you know what I'm saying? We need to, somehow we have to engage your prospects and your businesses that are here. Thank goodness they're here providing these jobs, but they're also going to have to be at the table when this tough decision gets made in the next 12 to 24 months.
Yeah. But you're right. Of course, everybody wants somebody else to pay for it, right? So they in terms of what companies might be willing to do, it really comes down to, how deep is the pain, and how is it affecting their business. But they are all very cost conscious. So the transportation industry is working on very thin margins. Warehouses work on very thin margins. So taking these shock waves that we saw on that first slide was a huge hit for them. And they're also having wage pressures. So adding on to that transportation costs in usage fees is very difficult for them to absorb. So we do have to be creative in where does it make sense to apply that extra expense, because you're right, it has to come from somewhere. But we need to make sure that we're not squeezing the wrong turnip, so to speak. Because we have to be smart about where all this is coming from. And as to whether or not these prospect companies are willing to do it, I don't have that answer. But I do know that we have to look with more at where is the margin that can absorb some of that cost and where is it not. And transportation has a difficult time having enough cushion in their margin to be able to really absorb that.
Anyone else? Thank you, Sandy. Appreciate it very much. Next, we have Jason Goldberg from Retail Geek. And Jason, you had a good introduction there a minute ago. We had a gentleman from Texas, and your subject is future of e-commerce, and he showed us some of the patents that Amazon had done recently, and I think the general thought in the room was, what? We were just amazed at what they were looking at. But thank you for working with us on time. We appreciate your time today, and we'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I'm thrilled to be here. My goal is for this to be useful for you, so I put together a few slides to talk about sort of big picture, what's happening in e-commerce and how it's impacting retail and what some of the near future needs might be. But I try to leave some time for questions or discussion as well. So feel free to chime in if there's a question or something that would be more valuable for your time. Did I successfully share my slides? Did you see a big ugly blue slide?
Yes, sir. We got you.
Awesome. Yeah. So again, my name is Jason Goldberg. I work for a big, the biggest advertising holding company in the world, and I lead commerce strategy for the group. So my biggest client by far is Walmart. I do a ton of work with Walmart, Best Buy, Home Depot, Target, you name it, on their long-term business strategies, and particularly their e-commerce. I helped launch e-commerce a million years ago at Best Buy and Target, and so kind of known as the digital retail guy. To kind of just level set, last year in the United States of America, the retail industry sold $5.6 trillion worth of stuff, which was 27% of the GDP in the middle of a pandemic. People ask me all the time, like, Jason, how long is it going to take retail to recover from the pandemic? The good news is no recovery required. Like $5.6 trillion was like 4% more than we sold in 2019. So overall, retail had a really good year. Normally retail is about a quarter of the GDP, so we're actually a little bigger chunk. Retail is also the largest employer in the US. So a very large, healthy, vibrant industry. Now, of that $5.6 trillion last year, 883 billion of it got sold through websites and delivered by the US Mail, US Post Office, UPS, and FedEx. And so that 833 billion represents about 15.7% of all retail sales. So 15 cents out of every dollar in retail gets sold via e-commerce. But the more important thing to know is how fast stores are growing versus e-commerce. So if we look at the last 10 years of store growth, last year store sales grew 3.4%. So that's everyone that walked into Walmart, Kroger, Publix, Home Depot. They bought 3.4% more stuff than they did the year before. And that's about average for us over the last 10 years. We've been kind of growing at 3 to 4% every year for the last 10 years. But if you say, how fast are the websites growing? How fast is e-commerce growing? The last 10 years, we've averaged about 12% growth. So 4 times faster than stores are growing, e-commerce has been growing. And in the year before the pandemic, that actually sped up. So we grew about 15% the year before the pandemic, And then the pandemic caused us to grow over 25%. So when people were less comfortable going in the stores, when they wanted to bundle more things together, they spent a lot more online than they usually do. Most retailers believe that's a permanent shift, that those customers that learn how to buy their groceries online aren't going to drive back to the stores often. And so we're all trying to figure out how to make money and be successful in a world in which a lot more of our sales are happening via these e-commerce sites than via the traditional stores model. And to give you an idea, the CEO of Target felt like the pandemic sped up e-commerce for his business about 3 years. So he's now 3 years ahead of where he thought he'd be. And if we kind of think about it, before COVID, 13% of all sales were online. In the peak of COVID, when people were really afraid to go to stores, 20% of all sales were online. And then it dipped back down to about 16%. And that's where it's sitting right now. And to be honest, I say 16% to a lot of people, and they go, 16% is nothing to sneeze at, but the vast majority of sales are still happening in stores. We got to figure out how to get the goods to stores. We got to figure out how to solve stores. 85% is a lot more important than 15%. And that's fair. But what I have to remind people is, whenever someone says retail, they probably mean something different than anyone else, right? So these numbers are all from the U.S. Department of Commerce. And the U.S. Department of Commerce calls McDonald's a retailer. They call a Mercedes dealership a retailer. They call an Exxon gas station a retailer, right? And so when we say 15% of all sales are e-commerce, that's including sales of gas, which no one buys online, cars, which very few people buy online, groceries, which almost no one bought online before the pandemic, right? And so if we start pulling some of those non-digital categories out, if we just take the restaurants out, 15% becomes 16% of all sales. If we take the gas stations out, it becomes 17% of all sales. If we take the car dealerships out, it becomes 21% of all sales. And if we take the grocery stores out, which again, before the pandemic, very little grocery was sold online. Now we're having an awful lot of grocery sold online. But if we take grocery out of the number, a quarter of all consumer spending is now happening in e-commerce, 26%. So it's a very significant chunk of sales, and it's growing much faster than stores. And then the other thing to know is the big national retailers are actually doing way better than the industry average. So this is store sales, and we said the industry average was 3.4% growth. But you look at Walmart for 4 quarters, they've been growing between 6 and 9%. You look at Kroger, they've been growing 15%. Target's been growing 20%. And then, of course, Amazon's growing the most because they have the fewest stores. And if you look at their e-commerce sites, they're growing way faster than the industry average of e-commerce. So e-commerce grew 25%, but Amazon's growing 40%. Walmart's growing 80%. Target's growing 100%. So these big national retailers that have a lot of stores in your state are increasingly selling a heck of a lot more of their stuff via e-commerce. And then we get to grocery, right? And grocery is about 15% of all consumer spending. None of it happened online before the pandemic, but the pandemic taught us all how to buy our bananas online. And so we all went to Kroger.com or Instacart or Whole Foods or whatever, and started buying our groceries online. If Target said that the pandemic accelerated e-commerce 3 years, it accelerated digital grocery like 7 years. What's unique about digital grocery is we don't ship the groceries out of the warehouse. Like the groceries still come from the store, but now we got to pay someone to drive those groceries from that store to the consumer's home for home delivery. And so the dynamics are a lot different. The fastest growing flavor of e-commerce, because of that grocery, is that the customer comes to the store and picks up the order. So you order it online, on your phone, on your website, you put together your 60-item grocery list, and then on the way home from soccer practice, you stop by the Walmart parking lot and someone puts your groceries in your trunk. So for Walmart, what this means is we got to take away parking spaces and we got to put more pickup locations in the grocery store. It means we need to change how we build our store to be better at delivering stuff from our store. And it means that we've got to get FedEx and UPS and US Post Office to start treating our stores like warehouses and sending big trucks to pick up all the orders that we want to ship from our stores. This is a weird graph. This is how long it took to get an order from Amazon and how long it took to get an order from Best Buy. And it used to take about 4 days to get an order from Best Buy, and it took 2 days to get an order from Amazon. And then there was this magic moment where Best Buy started delivering orders faster than Amazon. And everyone goes, well, gosh, how did Best Buy do that? Amazon's got 170 fulfillment centers. They've got, over 1 billion square feet of space. How is Best Buy possibly delivering faster? Well, what Best Buy decided to do is turn all of their stores into warehouses and start, instead of shipping their orders from fulfillment centers, from warehouses and industrial parks, ship all their orders from the 1,500 Best Buy stores in the United States of America. And when they do that, it means it only takes 1 day for the goods to get from that Best Buy store to the consumer instead of 3 or 4 days via a national carrier, and it's cheaper to deliver. So the way a lot of e-commerce has grown is by using stores as fulfillment centers. And today the best example of this by far is Target. Target will sell about $14 billion online this year, and 95% of their orders will not be shipped from a warehouse. They'll be shipped from the back of a Target store. And so when city planners are planning traffic, they used to count how many customers came to the store to plan traffic. Now these stores are generating a lot of traffic even when no customers walk up to them, right? Because they're shipping all these orders out the back of the stores. Target owns a delivery company called Shipt that they bought with all these shoppers that drive orders to individual consumers' house the same day, what we call the last mile. And instead of opening more stores, what Target is doing is opening sortation centers. So they're opening a sortation center in a city, and what they do is they move items from the store to the sortation center because they can get a bigger truck to the sortation center than they can get to the back of a traditional Target store. And a lot of those Target stores are in highly congested residential zones. And so we're seeing a lot of reinvention in how retailers think about planning their fleet of stores, where their stores are going to be, how customers are going to use the stores, what the space planning is for the stores, what the inventory planning. The whole world is changing because of this adoption of e-commerce. And then I'd be remiss on behalf of the retail industry if I didn't tell you about a huge transportation problem we're having this year that's never happened before in my 30-year experience in retail. Last year we had this bad thing happen called Shipageddon. And what Shipageddon was people bought all their stuff online instead of in the stores. So instead of growing 15%, we grew 25%. But you know how many new vans FedEx was able to buy? 4%. So FedEx enhanced their capacity 4%, but e-commerce demand grew 25%. So FedEx is a smart company. They did what any other smart company would do. When they had a limited capacity, what they did is they charged more for their capacity. So they put surcharges out there and they put quotas. If you're the Abercrombie and Fitch at the mall, you're not allowed to ship more than X amount of goods because I just don't have room for you. So although we took all these e-commerce orders, we weren't able to fulfill them last year because there wasn't enough capacity in the system to fulfill that last mile when the world shifted from going to stores and getting their own stuff to buying stuff online and getting it. And this year we're going to have a more acute version of that last mile problem, that Shipageddon problem, but we also have a huge supply chain problem that some of you probably know a lot more about than me. But normally these big containers, we pay about $4,000 to move a container from China to the west coast of the United States, to that port in Long Beach. Right now, we're paying $30,000 for that container. So more than 5 times as much for the container. The container used to take 40 days to get to Long Beach. Because there's no place to unload the containers, we have a parking lot of ships outside of the coast of California. And they're slowing down the ships coming here, so it now takes 80 days to get a container of shoes from China to the US. And so it's costing us way more to get all our stuff. Our stuff's coming here much slower, and every retailer and brand in America is freaking out. Like Nike had to lower their earnings and say, we're not going to sell as much this year as we did last year because we're paying 4 times as much for shipping the shoes here, and the shoes are taking twice as long to get here, so we're just not going to have all the shoes that customers want this year, right? On top of that, we have another version of that ship again, that customers aren't going to go to stores as much. They're going to order online. And I mentioned UPS grew 3.6%, FedEx grew 4%, the US Post Office added about 10% capacity, and e-commerce is growing 16 to 25%. So we're selling more home deliveries than we have room for. When we talk to the supply chain guys about these port problems and why all these containers are backing up, the root cause that they feel is the case is there's not enough rail, not enough trucks to move all of the goods from the ports to the stores, right? So Walmart and Amazon are in a knife fight to hire truck drivers. A bunch of the commercial truck drivers retired in the pandemic, the trucking schools closed, so we're not getting as many new drivers. That we have a huge capacity problem to get all our goods to the store so we can sell enough stuff to have our usual holiday season, which is obviously the most important time of year for a retailer. And you know, a lot of the big retailers, the CFO of Gap is saying like, this is not a 3-month problem, this is like a 13-month problem or 18-month problem. But we don't see the supply chain getting straightened out for at least a year. And the estimate is that that's going to add about $266 billion to the cost of goods that retailers sell at stores this holiday. So we're already at 4% inflation, 5.6% consumer price index expansion, and that's likely going to get worse for this holiday because of all these extra supply chain costs that are a unique part of this year. But the reason I point this out is, to me, this is the canary in the coal mine. This year we had this lumpy supply of trucks, but like if we could wave a magic wand and hire all those truck drivers and double our rail capacity, we're still going to have a problem that there's not enough asphalt on those roads to get all the growing number of trucks to all the stores, and increasingly from all the stores to the consumers. So that is kind of in hopefully 20 minutes, which is what I promised, kind of the lay of the land in e-commerce and retail. And I'm happy to discuss anything in more detail or answer any questions if y'all have any.
Jason, thank you. That's a whirlwind of information. And we appreciate that. But I'll start off with a question. You look at the e-commerce providers, I mean, in their discussions with you and others, I think you hit on a few of them, but what concerns are they having about getting that last mile, or just stuff in the States all over? I mean, our commission is like Senator Gooch just talked about, and you may have heard or you're listening, is about funding and how we can make it happen. I guess on your end, you're talking about the problems that they're seeing. I mean, you have just a few top 3 problems that these folks are looking at down the road.
Yeah, so one of the big problems that people don't like to talk about is it's for all the e-commerce guys, it's super exciting that e-commerce is growing way faster than retail. The one inconvenient truth of that is those e-commerce sales are way less profitable than the traditional retail sales are, right? If you think about your grocery order, when you go shopping in a Publix, you drove to the store, you provided all the labor to pull all those items off the shelf, and you provided all the labor and gas to drive those groceries home to your house. And so when you order those groceries from a website, you expect me to pull those groceries off the shelf, and you expect me to drive them to your house. And historically, you haven't been willing to pay any more for that. Whenever someone's tried to charge a fee for those extra services, consumers have balked at it. And so retailers are in this like horrible fight where they're all trying to win the digital customer. The customer said they want to shop digitally, but they're struggling to make money on it, right? Walmart will sell $34 billion worth of e-commerce stuff this year. They'll lose more than $5 billion on those sales. It's a total money loser for them. And what the hope is that once they get enough customers, they can figure out a way to make the unit economics work. And a bunch of the working theories are that store has to play a central role. We can't make this profitable by opening a bunch of warehouses and driving all the goods from the warehouse to the consumer's home, one item at a time, like we have in the past. And to be honest, if anyone's going to make money at that, it's only one person, it's Amazon. And Amazon has 170 fulfillment centers that are each over 1 million square feet in the US. The second biggest e-commerce retailer, Walmart, has 8 fulfillment centers. So they're so far behind, they never have a hope of catching up. They would have to invest hundreds of billions of dollars to catch up to Amazon. And so every brick and mortar retailer, Home Depot, all those retailers are saying, you know what, we're gonna have to use our stores as warehouses, and we're gonna have to figure out how to put more automation in those stores to make picking more efficient and let robots pick the stuff off the shelf. And we're gonna have to convince customers that it's in their best interest to come by the store and pick the stuff up so we don't have to drive it all home. And that changes how we use stores, it changes how much of the store we want for a building versus a parking lot. It fundamentally changes how we think about how many stores we need, where we should be opening new stores, which states are our growth strategy. All of those things change because of this wild changing unit economics as a result of e-commerce. But so you go talk to Doug McMillan, the CEO of Walmart, and what he's going to tell you is my big fear is everybody's learning how to shop digitally and we haven't figured out how to make money on it yet. And a big part of that problem is the logistics and delivery costs.
Thank you. So when you're looking at those trend lines that you showed, you know, 10, 15, up to 25%, I mean, what's your expectation in the future of that? Is that sharp incline going to continue, or is it, where is it level out? We're going to find a...
Yeah. Well, the fancy math guys have this principle called the law of large numbers. Like once the number starts getting really big, it's hard to grow as fast, right? If anyone were to experience that, it would be Amazon. Amazon is about 40% of all e-commerce sales in the US, and they're still like the top 3 fastest growing e-commerce sites in the US. So at the moment, even though these numbers are growing really fast, they're showing no signs of slowing down, and the biggest, largest player in the space, Amazon, isn't slowing down a lot. What we are seeing is Amazon's responding to all these retailers that are saying, hey, maybe stores are a competitive advantage over Amazon. And so you know what Amazon's doing is they're opening a lot of stores. And so Amazon right now has about 600 stores. They've invented a new grocery concept, not Whole Foods, a new grocery store called Amazon Fresh. They have 20 of them open right now. They'll probably have 1,000 of them in the next couple of years. And part of that is to get those bananas closer to the customer. And so, we're seeing like retailers all figuring out how to turn their stores into fulfillment centers, and we're seeing Amazon figure out how to turn their fulfillment center into stores. And all these grocery orders are to get your week's worth of groceries for your family, 60 items and 120 items. The next thing coming down the pipe is there are all these companies popping up that are offering to bring you just a quart of milk in the next 10 minutes. So it's what we call top-off delivery. And so there are now all these companies you probably wouldn't have heard of yet, but GoPuff and Gorilla and Joker that are raising millions or in some cases billions of dollars in venture capital to start delivery firms to bring home those diapers that parent desperately needs as a last-minute fill-in order. And those drivers for all those things are going to clog up those roads too. And if it's hard to make money selling 60 items in a grocery order, it's even harder to make money selling just one box of diapers.
Jason, Steve Gooch. So it sounds like the freight and logistics problem's not going to be the big trucks, it's going to be all the little cars and the small delivery vehicles in and out of these small neighborhoods and communities, right?
Yeah, this year we desperately want more big trucks. But the long-term problem we're seeing at the moment is exactly that if a significant chunk of store pickup becomes home delivery, it's a much more complicated network of those little delivery trucks. And as you may know, everything's a get-in now. Another problem in the retail industry at the moment is van-a-get-in. I mentioned UPS and FedEx are growing 4%. Part of that's because you know what they can't buy? Any more vans. Like there's no vans available like anywhere in the world. They all take this microchip that is made at one factory in Taiwan, and that factory is out of chips. So it's a mess. But yes, that last mile, Walmart, Amazon are hiring hundreds of thousands of their own drivers. And a bunch of other retailers are like trying to hire networks of gig workers to deliver all this stuff. So the Ubers and DoorDashes of the world, are all getting pretty heavily into the delivery business, and their expectation is they're going to make, hundreds of thousands of trips from stores to consumers' home here pretty quickly.
Thank you. Hey, one of our senior members, Calvin Smiley, said you hit the nail on the head. He said he would certainly enjoy listening to this. Any other questions from our members? I can add in here.
Invite me back when we can do some good news.
Anybody else? None. Hey, thank you, Jason, for taking time to really open our eyes to what's going on in the retail world, because we sure need to know. You've been very enlightening and informative to us. We sure appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, terrific to meet you guys. Hopefully we can do it in person next time, and all the best to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Sarah Gooch, you got a lot to think about now, don't you? Gets more difficult every time. But we appreciate you being here. Senator Gooch and I are doing our best to take in all this with our members, and we'll talk more with them. We haven't set a date for our next meeting yet. We know we'll be here our special session at some point. We're going to try to get together and work on that today. But as we always say, please, if you have an idea or something you think that we need to be talking about or looking into, get up with us, any of these members. We'd love to listen. And that's what I'm supposed to recognize Spencer Fry.
Yay.
We're in your district, Spencer. We're glad you're here.
Welcome. Thank you.
You tell us where to go eat lunch?
Absolutely.
You go see, he'll tell you. But if that's it, we adjourn our meeting. We thank y'all for being here.